Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. We are on the chapter of the Sadaq, Hadith 898. وعن عبد الله بن عامر ابن ربيعة عن أبيه رضي الله عنهما أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أجاز نكاح امرأة على نعلين أخرجه الترمذي وصححه وخولف في ذلك. From Abdullah ibn Amir, from his father, he says that the Prophet allowed a nikah where the mahar of the woman was 2 shoes. The hadith is ضعيف. Hadith 899. وعن سهل بن سعد رضي الله عنه قال زوج النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم رجلا امرأة بخاتم من حديد أخرجه الحاكم وهو طرف من الحديث الطويل المتقدم في أوائل النكاح. From Sahl ibn Sa'ad, he says, the Prophet married a man to a woman where the mahar was an iron ring. This hadith is part of a longer hadith which came at the beginning of the Kitab al-Nikah, and this is the narration in the Sahihain. However, we say about this particular narration that the Prophet did not actually marry this man where the mahar is an iron ring. Rather, the Prophet told this man to go and search for something even if it is an iron ring. Actually, the marriage took place where the mahar was the man teaching the woman some parts of the Quran which he knew. So there's a big difference here. So we say that this narration found in Al-Hakim is a waham, or it is a mistake made by one of the narrators where he was thinking what he's saying is correct, but in reality it is not correct. Hadith 900. وعن علي رضي الله عنه قال لا يكون المهر أقل من 10 دراهم أخرجه الدارقطني موقوفا وفي سنده مقال. From Ali, he is reported to have said that the mahar for the woman is not to be less than 10 darahim. This hadith is ضعيف. Hadith 901. وعن عقبة بن عامر رضي الله عنه قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم خير الصداق أيسره أخرجه أبو داود وصححه الحاكم. From Uqba ibn Amir, the Prophet said, the best sadaq is the one which is easiest to give, or the least. This hadith is Hasan. So from these preceding narrations, we learn something about the amount of mahar which is to be given. Even though all of these narrations are da'if except this last one, we say the amount of mahar, the best type of it is the one which is easiest to give. So the man must not be burdened to give a sky-high amount of mahar. So we say the mahar can be anything which is of value. So one of the narrations talks about 2 shoes. So if that narration is authentic, then we say that 2 shoes is an appropriate amount of mahar because the Prophet acknowledged it. And if it had not been permissible, then the Prophet would not acknowledge it. And about the narration of the iron ring, we take from it that it is permissible for men and women alike to wear iron ring, and that the narration which says that the iron ring is the hilyatu ahli nar, the adornment of the people of the fire, that narration is weak. And even if it is deemed to be authentic, we say it is shadh. So this is a narration which is authentic, but it opposes a more authentic narration than it. So we say this is shadh. And so therefore, it is not deemed to be authentic, and we don't take from it. Rather, we take from the narration which is more authentic than it. And the last narration tells us that the best sadaq is the one which is easiest to give. And we have talked about this issue before. It helps marriage in society. So the easier you make the mahar, the more marriages you're going to have. And the more marriages you have, the more families you will have. It will make for a stronger society. Children being born will know who their parents are and their bloodline and their lineage. It leads to stable families, which leads to stable societies. And we will prevent people from committing zina. Because the less marriages you have, then this will lead to an increase in zina in society, as we are experiencing with the kuffar societies. So this is something that we can learn from. So from the kuffar, we can learn how not to do it. But what about this? Can the woman say that the mahar you are going to give me will be that you will produce some work for me, or you will do some job for me? So it is not something which is wealth per se, but it is a service which the husband is going to perform for his wife. Some ulama say no, this cannot be, because the husband is an authority over the wife. It's not the other way around. So how can the husband be in service to the woman then? But the weightier opinion is that there is nothing wrong with this. and that the husband giving a service to the woman can be taken as a mahr. Somebody might use as evidence for this the fact that Musa alayhi worked for the father of his wife for some years before he married his daughter, where in Surah Al-Qasas the father says, إِنِّي أُرِيدُ أَنْ أُنْكِحَكَ إِحْدَى ابْنَتَيَّ هَاتَيْنِ عَلَىٰ أَنْ تَأْجُرَنِي ثَمَانِيَ حِجَجٍ فَإِنْ أَتْمَمْتَ عَشْرًا فَمِنْ عِنْدِكَ. I want to marry one of my daughters to you, that in return you should work for me for 8 years, but if you can make it 10 years, then this would be a favor from you. However, this evidence is not correct to be used because Musa alayhi was performing a service for his father-in-law, not for the wife. But regardless, we say that there is nothing wrong with this, that the mahr should be that the husband should perform a particular service for the woman. Because we know that the Prophet ﷺ allowed the marriage where he said that the mahr would be that you teach your wife some part of the Quran which you know. And this certainly is a service. But to this somebody might say, is it not haram to take a payment for the Quran? We say it's haram to take a payment to recite the Quran. So you recite the Quran and somebody pays you for doing this. This is because the Quranic recitation is a pure act of worship, and you're not allowed to take money for a pure act of worship. However, what we are talking about here is teaching the Quran. So this is a service which you are performing which will benefit somebody else. So teaching the Quran, just like teaching any other subject, is permissible for you to take money for it. What about this scenario? A man has a wife and he's going to get married to a second wife, and as the mahr to the second wife, he says, I will divorce my first wife. Can the second wife make this demand that I will marry you, but your mahr to me would be that you divorce your first wife? We say this is completely haram for her to do so. And we have a specific hadith to this effect which we have mentioned and discussed as well. لا تسأل المرأة طلاق أختها لتكفأ ما في إنائها. That a woman should not ask for the divorce of her sister in order to empty out her vessel. And so if they did agree for this to be the mahr, we say no, this cannot be given as the mahr, rather the presence of this mahr is like its absence. So in this case, the second wife will simply receive a mahr which is customarily given to women of her type. So whenever you have a case of a mahr which is batil, such as the one we have just mentioned, then the ruling in this case would be that the woman is to be given a mahr which a woman of her type is customarily given, and she is not to be given a batil mahr. And if he gives her as a mahr something which is unknown, for example, a servant who has run away, so you're not sure whether you'll be able to get hold of him or not, or something which is generally unknown, then we simply say that she deserves a mahr which women of her type normally would receive. So we find that in the past narrations, the things which have been mentioned as the mahr have been sawiq, or tamar, or na'alain, which are 2 shoes, or khatam min hadid, a ring made of iron, or 10 dirahim. And all of this proves that the mahr should be something low in value and easy to give. As for the narration which says that a mahr must not be less than 10 dirahim, then firstly, this narration is weak, so we don't take from it. And then secondly, it opposes a more authentic narration in which the Prophet told the man, seek something even if it is an iron ring, and an iron ring is worth less than 10 dirahim. So this further proves that the narration is weak, meaning the narration of the 10 dirahim. Rather, we say that the mahr can be less than 10 dirahim. Rather, the guiding principle here is that the mahr needs to be something of value and something which will benefit the woman. This is the bottom line. So we say that the scholars and people of authority should encourage a level of mahr which is easy to pay for everybody. And there is a narration which says that Umar radiallahu anhu, when he was Khalifa, was encouraging people to give a low amount of mahr and not to make a demand for a high amount of mahr. And then from the crowd a woman stood up and she opposed Umar in this view of his, and she said that it is permissible to demand a high amount of mahr, and as her evidence she quotes the ayah in Surah An-Nisa, ayah 20, وَإِنْ أَرَدْتُمُ اسْتِبْدَالَ زَوْجٍ مَكَانَ زَوْجٍ وَآتَيْتُمْ إِحْدَاهُنَّ قِنْطَارًا فَلَا تَأْخُذُوا مِنْهُ شَيْئًا أَتَأْخُذُونَهُ بُهْتَانًا وَإِثْمًا مُبِينًا. But if you intend to replace a wife with another, meaning divorce one wife and marry another woman, and you have given the first wife whom you're going to divorce a qintar, which is a huge amount of gold, then do not take anything of it back. Would you take it back? wrongfully, without a right, and with manifest sin. And in response to this, the narration says that Umar replied that the people know better than I do. But first of all, we need to note that this narration is da'if, and it cannot be taken as evidence, and its chain of narration is cut off. And even if you think about it, the ayah does not prove that it is permissible to demand a high amount of mahr. The ayah is telling us that if you have given them a high amount of mahr, you're not allowed to take anything back from them, because this mahr is the right of the wife. But this is completely different to saying that you should not impose a high amount of mahr on the men. So this ayah basically proves that if you have given a high amount of mahr, then this mahr, however high it is still correct, and the marriage contract can go ahead. But this does not prove that it is good and proper for the awliya of the women to demand a very high amount of mahr. Rather, we go by the authentic narration and we say that the best type of mahr is that which is easiest to pay off. Another advantage of having a low mahr is that if the marriage does not work out, then if the mahr was a high level of mahr which he gave, then the husband will be encouraged to not divorce the wife and keep her, because he does not want to lose the high amount of mahr which he gave. And this could be injurious to the wife, because it could be better for these two to split up. But because of the high level of mahr, he is discouraged from divorcing the wife. Also corroborating evidence that the mahr should be easy to give is another narration in which the Prophet ﷺ said, أَعْظَمُ النِّسَاءِ بَرَكَةً أَيْسَرُهُنَّ مُؤْنَةً. The most blessed wife is the one who is easy to maintain. In other words, she does not ask for so much expenditure. So this is another point for the potential bridegroom to factor in when choosing a wife. Hadith 902. وعن عائشة رضي الله عنها أن عمرة بنت الجون تعوذت من رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم حين أدخلت عليه، تعني لما تزوجها، فقال لقد عذت بمعاذ فطلقها، وأمر أسامة يمتعها بثلاثة أثواب. أخرجه ابن ماجه، وفي إسناده راو متروك، وأصل القصة في الصحيح من حديث أبي أسيد الساعدي. From Aisha, he says that the Prophet married Amrah bint al-Jawn, and when he entered into privacy with her, she said, I seek refuge in Allah from you. She said this to the Prophet. And so the Prophet replied to her, you have sought refuge in the one whom refuge is sought in. And he divorced her and ordered Usama to give her 3 pieces of clothing as a gift. This narration is authentic, but he did not order Usama, rather he ordered a companion called Abu Sa'id. And he told Abu Sa'id to give 2 items of clothing, not 3. So the first question is, why did this woman seek refuge in Allah from the Prophet? Suggestions have been made, and from them is that some of the wives of the Prophet got jealous because Amrah was a beautiful woman, and this created jealousy in the other wives. So they told Amrah that if you want to have some good luck with the Prophet, then when he enters upon you, say, I seek refuge in Allah from you. So they said this to trick her. And so when the woman did say this, then as the Prophet ﷺ said, Man ista'adhakum billahi fa'idhu. Whoever seeks shelter with you in the name of Allah, then grant him this shelter, or this refuge. So the Prophet ﷺ did exactly as he preached, and he let her go and divorced her. And so from this we can take that when you divorce a woman, then a gift should be given to her. And we have spoken about this issue before, and we said that the opinion which says it is wajib for you to give her a gift is a good opinion, and it is based on sound evidence. So that's an issue we spoke about before, and with this we come to the end of the chapter of the Sadaqah. Then Al-Hafidh said, Babu Walimatil Urs, the chapter of the wedding feast. The word Al-Walima comes from Al-Walam, which means to collect something together or to gather things together. And so it means that the Walima is gathering the people together for a feast because of the wedding. So the Walima is the feast. As for Urs, it means marriage. And the word Al-Irs with a kasra, this is the bridegroom, and the Al-Arus is the bride. And so this feast that you have because of the wedding is part of the announcement of the wedding. Because when everybody comes together to eat from the meal and to generally gather together, then this is a type of announcing the wedding because everybody gets to know about it. And the ruling on the walima is that it is recommended to give it because it is part of announcing the wedding, and also the Prophet ﷺ instructed the Ummah to give the walima. Let's take the first hadith in this chapter, hadith 903. وعن أنس بن مالك رضي الله عنه أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم رأى على عبد الرحمن بن عوف أثر الصفرة فقال ما هذا؟ قال يا رسول الله إني تزوجت امرأة على وزن نواة من ذهب. قال بارك الله لك أولم ولو بشاه. متفق عليه واللفظ لمسلم. From Anas ibn Malik, he says that the Prophet saw some yellow coloring on Abdurrahman ibn Auf, and he asked him, what is this? And he replied, O Messenger of Allah, I have married a woman, and the mahr was the weight of a date seed worth of gold. And so the Prophet said, may Allah bless you, give a walima even if it is with a sheep. Muttafaqun alayh. We know that the Prophet ﷺ said, Min husni islam al-mar'i tarkuhu ma la ya'ni. From the goodness of the Islam of someone is that he leaves alone what does not concern him. So you don't ask people about their affairs. But we find in this hadith that the Prophet is asking Abdurrahman ibn Auf, what is this yellow coloring on him? So is the Prophet guilty of interfering with other people's affairs? We say no. The Prophet has more right to the believers than they have over themselves, as the Quran clearly states. So every business of the Sahaba is in fact the business of the Prophet. And then what is most likely to be the case is that the Prophet felt that he got married, but the Prophet wanted to make sure. We find that the Prophet asked him what the yellow coloring was about, and he answered that he got married, but he gave more info where he said that he got married for a date seed weight of gold. So he gave some extra information, and there's nothing wrong with this for you to give extra information more than what you've been asked about. Normally when it comes to perfume of the men, then this is something for which you can find the smell, so it gives off a smell, but it does not give off a coloring. And the perfume of the women is that it would give off a coloring but not the smell, because the thing is that the smell can distract the other ajnabi men, whereas the coloring will be hidden, and so it is used to adorn yourself a bit more in front of your husband, of course. Now we find the Prophet asks Abdurrahman, what is this? Some scholars interpret this as a question of rebuke, as in, why are you wearing this yellow coloring? This is for women only. And we have other narrations, such as in Sahih Muslim, where the Prophet forbade za'fran for men, and in the Sunan, where a companion had za'fran put on his hands due to some cracks he had, and he met the Prophet, gave the salam, and the Prophet did not reply, and he told him to go away and wash this off you. So the general rule is that such perfumes of za'fran are not allowed to be worn, which give off this yellowish reddish coloring. The perfume for the men give off the scent, not coloring. The coloring is for women because they adorn themselves. Men do not adorn themselves because if they did, they would be imitating women. But Abdurrahman's excuse was that he was married, so it could be that the coloring got on him from his wife. However, the general rule remains that men are not to put colored perfume on themselves. We find in this hadith that it is legislated to make dua for the one who has been married. As the Prophet ﷺ said, Barakallahu lak, may Allah grant you blessing. So you can say it like this, or you can say it the other way with the hadith we mentioned earlier on. Barakallahu lak wa barakallahu alayk wa jama'a baynakuma fi khair. So you can say the longer version, or you can say the shorter version, but the point is that you should make dua for the one who is married, because it's a critical moment in his life. The marriage could be a blessing, but it could also be a curse. So this is why it is legislated to make dua, a sincere dua, for the married person. The ulama have differed as to the ruling of the walima. Some say it is mustahab, and some say it is wajib in accordance with your means. But the minimum that we can say is that it should be done. So if you have the ability to do so, then you should not fall short in this duty. And how much food should you have in the walima? The answer to that is that it depends on your ability. So here the Prophet ﷺ is telling Abdurrahman ibn Auf that it should be at least with a sheep. This is because Abdurrahman was fairly rich. But it does not have to be with a sheep, of course. It has to be in accordance with your means. Otherwise we're going to see that the walima of the Prophet was not done with a sheep, rather it was done with something far more basic than that. Where the Prophet tells Abdurrahman, وَلَوْ بِشَاءٍ, and even if it is with a sheep, it means even if it is for as less as a sheep. Some other people said that it means even if it is as expensive as a sheep. So even if you have to give it with a whole sheep, then you still must give it. But the correct opinion is the other one, that even if it is for as less as a sheep, because this is what walau in Arabic really implies. However, nowadays we find a complete role reversal. Whereas back in those days they could only have a walima with basic foodstuffs, nowadays we find people going to complete extremes and being extravagant in the amount they spend on the walima, and this is contrary to the sunnah, and it is actually wasting wealth. We also find that it is the husband who is charged with organizing the walima, because it is the husband who spends. When is this walima given? It could be done after consummating the marriage or before. It is a flexible matter, but the point is it is done after the marriage contract, because it is the marriage which creates the whole concept of a bride and bridegroom. Hadith 904 وعن ابن عمر رضي الله عنهما قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إذا دعي أحدكم إلى وليمة فليأتها متفق عليه ولمسلم إذا دعا أحدكم أخاه فليجب عرسا كان أو نحوه. From Ibn Umar radiallahu anhuma that the Prophet said, when one of you is called to a walima, then let him come to the walima. And in a wording of Muslim, when your brother calls you, then you must answer, whether it is the meal of the urs, meaning the walima meal, or other than that. Hadith 905 وعن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم شر الطعام طعام الوليمة يمنعها من يأتيها ويدعى إليها من يأباها ومن لم يجب الدعوة فقد عصى الله ورسوله أخرجه مسلم. From Abu Hurairah, the Prophet said, the worst food is the food of the walima, in which the one who would come to it is prevented from attending, and the one who refuses to come is called to it. And whoever does not answer the call, then he has disobeyed Allah and His Messenger. Muslim reported this. So with these ahadith, we learn something about the ruling of replying to the call, so attending the feast of the walima. The Prophet ﷺ told us that when one of your brother calls you to the walima, or to some gathering in which food is being served, we take from this that if a kafir calls you, then it is not obligatory upon you to respond. And it is more than likely that if a kafir calls you to his wedding feast or some other sort of gathering, that there will be haram elements to this gathering that you will not be able to change. But even if there were no haram elements, with the hadith we still understand that it is not obligatory to respond to his call. The ulama say that subject to certain conditions, it is obligatory upon you to answer the call of the walima, but as for the other calls, then what is apparent from the hadith in Muslim is that it is obligatory upon you to respond, because the order has been given here, and the order denotes obligation, because the Prophet said, عُرْسًا كَانَ أَوْ نَحْوَهُ, whether it is a walima meal, meaning the urs, the wedding feast, or something similar to it. However, the scholars say that if it is something other than the walima meal, then it is at best recommended for you to attend. And we find that the walima attendance is obligatory upon you, subject to conditions, because the Prophet said, whoever does not answer the call, then he has disobeyed Allah and His Messenger. So it means it has to be haram if you don't attend the call, if the conditions apply to you. And the other opinion is that even if it is something other than the walima, it is obligatory upon you to answer the call in accordance with the generality of this hadith. Why does the Prophet call it the worst of the food, that the one who will come to this food is prevented? This is talking about the rich people and the poor. So when it comes to the poor people, they will certainly attend the walima feast, because of course they are in need of food, but these types of people are turned away. So the Prophet is calling this the worst type of food, when you turn away the poor people who really need to eat, but you will only invite the rich people. So this hadith is mainly directed to these upper class people who will look down upon the poor of the society, because it's the rich people who will refuse to come. They don't need to come, maybe they are too proud, or maybe they feel they don't need to eat anything. So these people who will refuse to come, they are invited in. So the rich are invited and the poor are turned away. This type of food is the worst of the food. The Prophet says, whoever does not answer the call, then he has disobeyed Allah and His Messenger. So we find here that the Prophet has mentioned Allah and His Messenger in the same sentence all together at the same time. So is this sort of thing permissible? Is the Prophet raising himself to the level of Allah Jalla wa Ala as he mentions them both in the same sentence? For example, when one of the Sahabi came to the Prophet and said, Ma sha Allahu wa shi'ta, whatever Allah and you will, And the Prophet told him, أَجَعَلْتَنِي لِلَّهِ نِدًّا? Have you made me as a peer with Allah? بَلْ مَا شَاءَ اللَّهُ وَحْدَهُ. But rather say whatever Allah wills alone. And in another narration he says, بَلْ قُلْ مَا شَاءَ اللَّهُ ثُمَّ شِئْتَ. But rather you say whatever Allah wills, and then after that what you will. So the point is, you don't want to be saying them in the same sentence and putting them on the same level. But if that's not allowed, then is this not a contradiction then in this hadith? Because he says he has disobeyed Allah and His Messenger. Should he not have said he has disobeyed Allah? The answer is no, there's no contradiction, and the way to understand it is as follows. In the other hadith, where the Prophet says, whatever Allah wills, and then what you will, this is talking about the universal affairs. And nobody shares in Allah when it comes to these universal affairs. But as for when it comes to the Shara'i affairs, affairs pertaining to the Sharia, then it is true to say that Allah is the one who legislates, but also we can say that the Prophet legislates, because he also has authority. So you disobeying Allah is the same as you disobeying the Prophet. So it does hold true that you have disobeyed them both, because this is a Shara'i affair, it is not a Kawni affair, it is not a universal affair. So now let us talk about an important issue, which is the conditions for it to be obligatory for you to respond to the walima. So firstly we say the condition is it has to be from a Muslim whom it is not obligatory to abandon. Because from the Muslims there could be those it is obligatory upon you and other Muslims to abandon them because of the dalala they are upon, or because of the bid'ah they are calling to. Likewise with a kafir, it is not obligatory upon you to answer his call, and if it is a call which is pertaining to his deen, then it is haram for you to answer this call. Because for you to attend this would be you approving of his deen, and it is not permissible for any Muslim to approve of any deen other than al-Islam. You have to make complete kufr in all other religions, ways of life and adyan. So if somebody invites you to a Christmas party or to an Easter party or anything of that sort, it is completely haram to attend. Because for you to attend, you would be silently approving of their misguidance. And we say you're not even allowed to greet them on their religious festivals. As for other occasions, like their marriage or a child being born to them, then on this issue there is a difference of opinion amongst the scholars. Some say yes, you can congratulate them, others say no, you cannot. So when it comes to non-religious affairs, one opinion is that you can congratulate them if it is in return for them congratulating you. So in this case, you're merely repaying them the favor. And this appears to be a nice balanced opinion. But as for religious festivals or celebrations, then it does not matter whether they congratulate you on your religious festivals or not. You are not allowed to congratulate them in the absolute sense. As for the Muslim whom you abandon, then the evidence for this is the Prophet and his companions abandoning Ka'b ibn Malik and 2 other companions when he did not attend the expedition of Tabuk, and they abandoned him for 50 days and nights. The basic rule on abandoning another Muslim is that it is haram to do so unless in abandoning him there will be a benefit. Because the point is that as long as he's a Muslim, then he has rights over you that you do not abandon him. And even if he is a sinful person, this does not kick him out of the fold of al-Islam. So for example, he is calling to sinful activities, for example, smoking or shaving the beard off, then you would have to assess the situation. If the Muslims abandon him in this case, will it lead to him refraining from his da'wah, or will it not make a difference? So abandoning is like taking medicine. You only take it if it will benefit. Otherwise, you don't just take medicine every day just for the sake of taking it. Or for example, you could have a Muslim who openly and shamelessly commits sins. So again, you assess the situation. Is it going to be beneficial for the community to abandon him or not? If it is beneficial, then you abandon him. Otherwise, you don't. So with regards to the one who is openly committing sins, if the community would abandon him, and then this person would feel like a stranger in his own homeland, where nobody is saying salam to him, nobody returning the salam, nobody speaking to him or socializing with him. So if this is going to cause him embarrassment and he's going to change his ways, then yes, in this case, the abandonment is like a medicine which we should take. Because when you see an evil, you need to change it. And if changing it will come about through the abandonment, then so be it. Then condition number 2 is that he calls you personally. So he calls you by name. because the point now is that he has specified you particularly individually. So now you must attend. So for example, if he calls a group of people without naming anyone in particular, and you happen to be in that particular group of people, then it is not obligatory upon you to attend.
Unless you know from indication that he does intend you, even if he did not state your name explicitly, because what is not known explicitly can sometimes be known implicitly.
Then the third condition, that there must not be any munkar or any evil activity in the place. If there is evil activity in the place and you are able to change it, then it is obligatory upon you to go there and change it. If you are not able to change it, then you do not attend a walima of this type. And the type we're talking about here is the one which has music and free mixing. This is mainly the type of munkar you will find nowadays in the walima. But it could be something else. The point is, as long as there is a munkar there, you do not attend. They differed as to if the person's money is from a haram source and he's serving you the food, are you allowed to eat this food or not? Some say no, you're not, because it's from a haram source. And some say yes, you are, as long as the food itself is halal. As for the man earning his haram money, then this is his problem. He will have to sort that out with Allah Jalla wa Ala. And this seems the better opinion, because earning the haram is done from his side, not from your side. You are merely eating the halal food. So the point is that this food is haram for him to consume because he is consuming it from the haram means, but it is halal for you to consume because you are just simply accepting the gift and you are allowed to accept the gift. And we know this because when some meat was given to Barira as a sadaqah, the Prophet wanted to eat from this meat. But the point is that this meat is from sadaqah and the Prophet is not allowed to eat from the sadaqah. But to this the Prophet replied that this is a sadaqah to Barira, but from Barira to us it is a gift, and the Prophet is allowed to eat a gift. And it's a similar situation here. You are consuming this as a gift, which you're allowed to take, of course. You are not consuming this food because you earned the haram money and you are now consuming this food from the haram money. However, if the food is haram in and of itself, then you're not allowed to attend. So for example, the food may be halal, however, it is stolen or usurped. So this type of food is haram in and of itself, and you are not allowed to consume it, because the food is not halal in and of itself. So if the food is haram in and of itself, then you're not allowed to consume it in all cases.
Authentically, in the Musnad of Imam Ahmad, the Prophet ﷺ said, "Man kana yu'minu billahi wal yawmil akhir, fala yaq'ud ala ma'idatin yudaru alayha al-khamr." Whoever believes in Allah and the last day, then let him not sit at a table in which khamr is present. وَمَنْ كَانَ يُؤْمِنُ بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ فَلَا يَدْخُلِ الْحَمَّامِ إِلَّا بِمِئْزَرٍ. And whoever believes in Allah and the last day, then let him not enter the public baths except wearing a mi'zar, which is the waist wrapping. وَمَنْ كَانَتْ تُؤْمِنُ بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ فَلَا تَدْخُلِ الْحَمَّامِ. And whichever woman believes in Allah and the last day, then let her not enter the public baths.
And the fourth condition is that in attending this walima, there must not be any harm upon you. For example, if you have an important duty or some important work to do, and if you attended the walima and didn't do the work, then you will be in trouble from your boss. So if it is something of that sort, then it is not obligatory upon you to attend the walima. And the fifth condition is that this walima must be the first time round. So if they call you for a second walima,
which some people might do, then this is not obligatory upon you to attend. And the sixth condition is that there must not be any harm upon you in attending the walima. For example, if you cannot take time off work and missing work is going to lead to some sort of harm, or maybe you fear leaving your house, then you do not need to attend the walima. It may even be the case that this invitation to the walima is a bribery to you, where somebody is trying to get something of you by bribing you, but instead of giving you money, he is inviting you to the walima. Such a walima is impermissible to attend. Okay, let us take some review questions. Question number 1. Give the basic rule about how much the mahar should be, and then give 2 advantages of this particular basic rule. Question number 2. What is the walimatul urs, and what is the ruling on holding it. Question number 3. We said attending the walima is obligatory subject to 6 conditions. Recall them.